Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. As you can see, I have a different backdrop today. I'm fresh from the launch of my book, Who Killed SSR? And this launch took place today in Constitution Club in New Delhi. Yesterday, I did the same in Mumbai. And I look forward to all your support. I hope you all read it. I want you to buy it and then read it and then write a comment about it on Amazon. Enough of my stuff. Let's now welcome the guest of the evening, Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji. Pandit ji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Pranam, Jai Shri Ram, Sri congratulations on the book. Yet another contribution to the whole space there. Dare I ask you who did it? But I know you're not going to tell me. So, but well done. No, congratulations. Yeah, I look forward to getting my hands. Yeah, I look forward to getting my hands on it very soon. So have
Absolutely.
We'll need you to stop into London on your way back to the United States so that we can find out who did it. But no, excellent, wonderful contribution. And I'm sure it's going to be like the other books in that the title is merely an indicator and an excuse to pull out all of the murky underworld and the real stories, what's happening behind these movements. So I'm looking forward to reading it and best of luck with it.
Thank you so much, Pandit ji. So today I have a slightly different perspective to look at in terms of the BBC hit job on Modi. First of all, this is in English, and the majority of Indians, I mean, if there's an option to listen to something in Hindi versus English, they would definitely use Hindi because 70%, 80% probably understands Hindi. That is the bread and butter in terms of the voting bloc for Narendra Modi. And they yet go ahead and put it out in English. And they basically go back and rake the same thing that's about 20 years old. And I'm like, people are, 59 minutes of droll. Who wants to watch it? That's a feeling in India. Panditji, I'm wondering if there's a different ulterior motive in BBC airing this. Your thoughts, sir?
It's a good question to ask. And on the surface, you're absolutely right. Why do something like this? But there is a deeper motive. And I've been watching the anti-India, anti-Hindu, anti-BJP social media space to see how they've received the BBC's broadcast. Documentary is a funny name for it because it was merely a piece of propaganda and atrocity literature, very poorly researched and more about innuendo and inference rather than evidence and facts. So if you dig a little bit deeper, we see that the anti-BJP ecosystem has really taken this BBC content. And that leads me to just remind myself that the capacity of the anti-BJP movement to produce good quality content has virtually disappeared. There is no credibility in the rubbish that they generate. And AAP, for example, the content that comes out from Shri Kejriwal's group is just laughable. It's a comedy, isn't it? And so imagine not being able to have content of any credibility. You would need to be able to use somebody whose content is perhaps still carrying a little bit of weight, that if the BBC say something, then Sach hi hoga, BBC walon ne kaha. This is more important than the message, isn't it? It's the old Ram ka naam is more important than Shri Ram and more shakti-shali than Shri Ram himself. And so the BBC have done, I think, is two things. One is they have started their campaign for the 2024 elections. Okay. And we knew that this was going to, in the United Kingdom. Last year, towards the end of last year, in fact, as soon as Leicester had happened and we saw what the BBC did then, we were clear that the BBC would launch an anti-BJP campaign in 2023. And this is what I think we're seeing now.
Panditji, I have a question for you, and this is one of those cheesy one-liners that I come up with. The British Hindus liked Bojo's Mojo. Will they like Rishi's Krishi? Now this time, it is not Rishi's Krishi not the British Hindus liking the Rishi's Krishi, but the British liking Rishi's Krishi. Your thoughts, sir?
So the second aspect is, as far as I feel, the second aspect is that Rishi is a Hindu prime minister, and all of a sudden we have Bharat leading the G20. We have Hindus, and especially Shri Modi ji, being given an incredible reception all over the world. We see a huge footprint for India at Davos. From what I've been able to see, India pretty much took over Davos. And it's just India, India, Hindu, Modi. Is becoming a mantra. It's becoming a part of the way in which people think. And so what the BBC has also done is launched something which should be understood as a Hindu-Muslim conflict incitement campaign. The whole of this program that they have. Yes?
Yeah. Continue, sir. Are you finished, Satish? Panditji? I can't hear you. Can you hear me? We seem to have some difficulty.
I seem to have lost your audio.
Okay. I can hear you just fine. I can hear you fine.
Okay.
We're going to try.
I'm sorry, I've lost your audio.
You want
Can
to
I
rejoin?
just step out and come back in a moment? Let me just try that. Okay, I'll be back in 2 seconds. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you. Thank you. So viewers, while Panditji disconnects and reconnects again, and here's a shout out to like this video, and also please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Panditji is rejoining. For some reason, he was talking fine. I am able to hear him. I'm sure you're able to hear him, but he is not able to hear me. So we are trying to re-establish the connect. So just wait one moment and he will be rejoining us. There's much to come. There's much to come as a desperate left media. Lely, you want to call them woke, you want to, whatever you want to call them. These people are really desperate. They want to somehow disturb this apple cart. They think that by taking aim at Modi, they are actually taking aim at Rishi Sunak. The only commonality between the two being that both have said that they are Hindus. So just that one line appears to be enough for them to start spewing venom. Here he is. He's coming back. Here we go.
I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. You're able to hear me now. Fine, right?
I can hear you loud and clear. I think somebody in the BBC was probably hacking the stream. But
absolutely. Blame it on the BBC.
Apologies. Why not? We've been given such a golden opportunity by their terrible broadcasting. We should make the most of it. But
yes,
I was just saying that I don't think it's a coincidence at all. And, you know, the prospect of Bharat being a $10 trillion economy driven by a Hindu and a patriotic Hindu majority population represented through the BJP is actually quite a scary prospect. You know, there was a time when Bharat was the only major economy, you know, Sone ki Chidiya and so on. The world looked up at this economy that was running without having inflicted horrors and without having inflicted slavery on populations, and yet it was producing incredible wealth. And now we're doing the same thing again. It's moving into that same space, and there is such a dynamism everywhere in Bharat, and I'm sure you've seen this at the moment. There is a great energy, a lot of activity in the commercial sector, in the religious sector, in the charity sectors. There is dynamism and life force beginning to start to say, this is what we want to do to the world. And it's wonderful to be participating in it. Of course, it's a threat to the hegemony of the global Western superstructures. And the BBC is part of that. You know, the BBC has always controlled the narrative. It's been the global narrative builder, hasn't it? It's been the one engine which has reached more people than anybody else with its messaging. And this is such a carefully curated mechanism that they've created. And so they do not want to lose that. And we have seen how Prime Minister Modi ji, as an individual, commands a great deal of respect. He commands a great deal of character based almost adoration, the Western leaders would envy that. Can you imagine what Joe Biden would give to have the courtesy and respect and the deference and appreciation that Prime Minister Modi commands? It's chalk and cheese. And, sadly, it was the same with Boris Johnson here as well. And so, yes, there is a policy. I would go as far as to say that in 2024, the BBC has started its regime change campaign. And it's not a sole agent in this sort of an activity. This is how it starts, isn't it? Do you remember? First, it was Mad Dog Gaddafi, even though his own population lived under incredibly wealthy circumstances and the state supported so many. And then it was Saddam Hussein and the weapons of mass destruction. And now it's Prime Minister Modi, the BJP, and their anti-Muslim hatred and fascism. It's a same toolkit that's being deployed.
Panditji, let's take a critical look at what Rishi Sunak has done to the British economy. How do you see it? I mean, we don't need to, sugarcoat anything. We are just observers, objective observers. How do you see the Rishi Sunak administration in the past few months, ever since he took control?
I don't think that Rishi Sunak's actions have yet started to make an influence. Remember, when he came into the sphere of guiding policy, it was as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and that was under Boris Johnson's government. And so much of what was done and initiated in that time, it actually came out of a much larger brief driven by Prime Minister Johnson. And we are still in the throes of coming out of that COVID lockdown period. There has never been a moment in history where 2 years worth of economic activity, 2 years worth of academic schooling, everything was suspended. And all of a sudden, we're now out of it. So it's a shambles. Everything collapsed in that 2-year period. And to rebuild it and restart this engine is going to take a huge amount of effort. One thing that is apparent, and that is that his integrity, that his lack of back deal room making instinct. We're now discovering that so many members of the Boris Johnson government made deals and gave hugely lucrative contracts to their best pals. That sort of thing won't happen under Rishi Sunak's leadership. But his support is really lacking inside of the Conservative cabinet. This is a difficulty we're seeing. Will he be able to implement his policies? He has the leadership. He may announce exactly what the policies are. But to implement them, you need a cabinet which is populated with very competent people. And I don't see that we have enough of them. You'll see the same old faces like musical chairs cropping up. There's a casualty, a couple drop off the table at the end, and then they will wheel out somebody who's also tired and worn. So he has to weather that stage now. There is a cleaning house process going on. I think he has the time between now and when the next election is. I think if he can hold fast, if he can recognize that he has to carry the people with him, that he has to win the support of the people, then he'll be able to do it. But it's that time. I mentioned the dynamism in the Bharatiya community in India. It's the people who are now raising the economy, and it's the people who've been inspired by the leadership of a charismatic leader. Here, we've not had a charismatic leader for quite some time. Liz Truss was anything if charismatic. And, Rishi, with all due respect to him, he's a hedge fund manager. And many times you see him speak and you think, well, this is a presentation that a CFO would do in front of shareholders. But it's not the presentation, it's not the communication style yet of a leader infusing and empowering a population to rise up to meet the challenge. That's the biggest need. If you can do that, I think we'll have an exceptional result. If he can't do it, then I think he'll struggle. And the knives are always out in the corridors of Westminster.
Panditji, I want to ask you an honest question, and you can say I don't know also. That's also an option, sir. Now, you have defined the requirement for someone to lead United Kingdom out of this post-Brexit, post-COVID mess. And that's going to require passion, grit, determination, even a Churchillian kind of a disposition.
Yes.
Do you see anyone like that across the party lines? I'm not limiting to one party. What do you see on the horizon?
Well, it is tragic. There is a great poverty when it comes to that level of leadership in the country. It's suffering from many types of poverty, and poverty of leadership is definitely one. If you look at the Labour Party, Keir Starmer had so much potential, and he seems to be a thoroughly decent sort of a chap, but he is a lawyer. He's a barrister, and we always know that. Barristers act under instruction, don't they? When you appoint a barrister, the term is that he has received instructions. And I often get the sense that our dear Keir Starmer is always waiting to receive instructions. He's not charismatic, but he's slowly becoming a little bit better. It's lacking there. And who knows, with the passage of time, maybe we will see this side of Rishi emerge. When you're a spreadsheet geek, when you're a finance nerd, the last thing that you do is to acquire the skills to be able to inflame a population so much so that if need be, they will go to war and sacrifice life and limb. I can't see Rishi doing that yet, but hopefully his advisors have made him aware of that. We have the Liberal Democrat Party. I think we have them. We haven't heard hide nor hair of them ever since the last election. And so are they going to suddenly appear? I don't know. I don't think so. But on the fringes, there are a couple of interesting developments. The Reform UK Party, led by Mr. Tice, is beginning to make very big inroads. And I think there is actually a great opportunity for a centre-right party to emerge if a charismatic leader can step into that space. There is a gentleman, Nigel Farage, who pops in and out of politics according to the direction that the ship is being steered in. If he were to step into the vacuum, he is one of those British type of leaders who I think would connect with the mood of the country. He's very much more connected to the sentiment of the people as a whole than many leaders have. So there is a vacuum to be fulfilled. And there is even word that Boris Johnson's camp are now saying that Boris will come back. Who knows? At this time, anything can happen.
Panditji, what was the real reason why Boris Johnson had to leave? Was it all the partying that took place during COVID? Was that the one reason? Here he is asking everybody to stay home, but he's out partying. That sort of irresponsible behavior perception?
I think it was a number of things. The Labour Party have a particular profile when it comes to their period in governance, and the Conservative Party has their own unique profile. The Conservatives Party, their profile is that after a period of time, corruption becomes endemic. There are so many dodgy deals and background schemes at play. And then what happens is, shall we say, the leaders always tumble to vices. And this is something that has happened time and time again within the Conservatives. And so it was running its course. But I think the thing that really made, shall we say, Boris had to go was that the general public was suffering under lockdowns to such a terrible degree that it would only take a straw to break the camel's back. And so what ordinarily would have been brushed off as a relatively insignificant minor transgression became so amplified because the nation was hurting so much. There were scenes where grandparents were separated from their children and grandchildren and passed away in isolation, very publicly broadcast scenes. There were many scenes where the vaccines were seen to have caused severe injury, and yet it wasn't being taken seriously by the government when it came to the behavior of the ministers. They weren't observing the same rules. And hypocrisy and corruption are what always bring the Conservatives down. With regard to the left, it's always infighting. They're incompetent and they always end up killing each other. The knives come out normally in March time, in the Ides of March, and then there's a bloodletting and the left sort of collapses. So it was timely. I think that's really what did it with Boris. But there is one aspect which is now beginning to become clearer. Prime Minister Modi ji rejected Pfizer's assault on India, Pfizer's demands that they be given indemnities and so on and so forth. And now that even the CDC are investigating a connection between the vaccine and cardiac arrests, all of a sudden people are saying, well, hang on a minute, we've been party to an unofficial clinical trial. And that is an increasing conversation. And that happened under Boris Johnson's, on his watch, under his government. And so these are the two major aspects which I think are going to cause problems.
Last, before I wrap up this conversation, last question, sir. The commission that Rishi Sunak was going to put together to sort of go and make a concentrated attack to bring down these grooming gangs and so on and so forth. What's the status of that?
Oh dear. Well, the remarks being made by the young ladies who suffered, the victims, are that if anything, the situation is worse than it was before. And so putting aside the way in which the administration and authorities, public authorities, always seek to hide themselves, the situation on the ground is deteriorating and very little progress has been made. It's going to be a very, very tough project to execute. Remember, Priti Patelji, she also desperately tried to make progress on this, and she received such an awful backlash from the Home Office, from the civil service, from the police force. She made some significant changes. Then we had Sajid Javid, who also made the same announcements that I'm a Pakistani, and it hurts me to hear that so many members of the Pakistani community are engaging in this. I'm going to deal with this. And he's moved on, and the problem still persists. So I don't think Rishiji is going to do very much or be allowed to do very much. It's a long process. But if he can do something, if he can get enough political muscle and momentum and support behind him, then he might make a change. But there is a clock ticking on that as well. It will take him one decent success to capture the mood and the support of the nation. And to be honest, that would be a wonderful thing for him to deliver. Will he be able to deliver it? We have yet to see. Britain is facing a moment of crisis in terms of illegal migrants. You may have heard that almost every week over 1,000 young men are basically arriving on these shores. And the assimilation is becoming very, very difficult. There are open protests now on the streets in towns and villages where there used to be a welcoming embrace saying, immigrants are welcome. So the mood has shifted in that space as well. And that, I think, is going to be more of a challenge. Criminality is increasing. As I said, the drain on resources, the National Health Service, trying to get appointments from doctors and being seen within a reasonable time in hospitals. All of these are very, very real challenges which his prime ministership has to deal with. So in amongst all of that, I have a suspicion that sadly the situation to do with grooming gangs is not going to get the attention it deserves, which is a shame, because I think that is such a phenomenal and very, very tragic continuing crime here in the United Kingdom, and it's not being dealt with.
Thank you very much, Pandit Ji. And now let's take a look at some of the questions that are coming our way. Here's the first question.
If I can just say one thing, I've just given you a list of all of the challenges facing the country, okay? And yet the BBC decides that what it needs to do is to go and do a 2-part documentary on an event that happened in 2002 in a country 6,000 miles away. And it's gone ahead and done that. This is the way in which the BBC functions. So many problems at home. Let's divert attention by creating a fire in a country a long way away, and let's see whether we can get away with it. So there we have it. What I'd like to do is to just mention to everyone, hashtag BBC Mukt Bharat. This should be our objective. We do not need a BBC in Bharat at all. It contributes little except difficulty. And if we were to be able to, shall we say, tag or bell that cat at this stage, I think the journey between now and 2024, the elections, would be a lot smoother. The BBC's participation and contribution will not be a positive influence between now and the election. So BBC Mukt Bharat. Thank you.
We will add that hashtag in this transmission also.
Okay.
But one question, Pandit Ji. I thought all the regional languages such as BBC Hindi, BBC Telugu, BBC Tamil, all these things have now shut down. Is that not true?
I think one of their broadcasting services, they had a culling of staff and dramatically reduced it. I think BBC Hindi was the one whose radio broadcasts, was it? But one medium was curtailed. But you see, the BBC is going to use everything it can find anywhere in the world to create chaos and conflict and to perpetuate its own agenda. And so even something happening in Bharat, the BBC will pick it up to try and influence affairs here in the United Kingdom. And we saw that in Leicester. We saw, now we're seeing it in to do with this particular report. And there'll be many more to follow. My understanding and the information I have about the episode to be aired next week by the BBC in this documentary is that it's going to focus on CAA. It's going to talk about Article 370. It's going to talk about the farmers' laws. And we saw how each of those issues was used to create a huge civil disturbance and in some instances cost many lives and harm to property. And the BBC is going to deliberately rake all of that up. And this dates back to a time which was even before the British went to the 2003 illegal war in Iraq. You know, Tony Blair was responsible with George Bush for what, 300,000 Iraqi deaths and millions more removed from their homes and a whole society destroyed. Somebody perhaps should do an article on that, do a documentary on that. This is, as I said, just another example of the BBC's mischief making.
Well, we all know. Let's see how this things plays out. First question, Panditji, Pavan Kumar Mohan Murli wants to know, is Britain back to its time-tested divide and rule policy, or do we see this as a desperate attempt to taint Modi? Is there backing for this in the United Kingdom?
It's a great question. Thank you, Pavan Kumarji. Let's break it down into a few aspects, though. The average British citizen is not of this mind. This is an act which the, shall we say, the state and the establishment of which the BBC is a part engage in. Now, the BBC is definitely engaged in divide and rule. If there was one thread running right the way through that whole documentary, part one, it was Hindus attack Muslims. Hindus are savages. Muslims are the peaceful minority who are vulnerable. And that's classic divide and rule. You identify a group, then you use difference to elevate one, diminish the other, and create a conflict between them. So this first part of the documentary is a great lesson in understanding exactly how divide and rule politics is implemented. So yes, the BBC is definitely up to doing that. The BBC is a state broadcaster. And when the government wants something to be announced, they will announce it through the BBC. The BBC has special access to establishment, to monarchy, well, maybe less so to monarchy after what the BBC did to destroy the marriage of the Prince and Princess of Wales, but the BBC still is the official voice of many establishment entities. And so, yes, if the BBC are saying it, we have to assume that the establishment has given its blessing. So this is classic divide and rule, but it's not being done with the approval of the British people. I think that should be made really clear. The British people have as many problems with the BBC, if not more, than many of the people in the former colonies.
Well, that brings us to a close of today's broadcast.
Wonderful.
Thanks for watching, viewers. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to click on the bell button for notification. Panditji, a joy and a pleasure to listen to you, sir. This has been long coming. I mean, we have tried hard. Sometimes, I was traveling. Sometimes you're busy. And I'm glad that this came about today. Thank you once again, sir. And viewers, will keep you posted. This is, like Panditji said, this is just the first in what is expected to be a series of Modi bashing videos. So we'll wait and see. Thank you once again, Panditji. Namaskar.
Sriji, if I can do a reach out on your behalf, we have just seen the harm that the BBC as a broadcaster is capable of doing. One hour broadcast in terms of substance, and look at the impact it's had on the global economy, the global Hindu ecosystem. It's devastating. And so we have got to create our own capacity to dissipate their harmful narratives. And initiatives like P. Guru's and Sriji's commitment to this message, it needs support. Sriji has been, and his team have been pressing P. Guru's and pushing it to ever greater heights to give us this voice. Imagine if there was no P. Guru's at this time. Where would we go to try and rebut some of the ridiculous, nonsensical allegations and incitement which people like and entities like the BBC put out there? We wouldn't have any way of dissipating it, and everybody would assume it to be the truth. Fortunately, we have got now people like Sriji and P Gurus and other channels doing this work. And so they do warrant support. And it's absolutely critical that we understand that this is no longer an option. This is an obligation. If you do want to see a genuine renaissance in the Bharatiya space, in the indigenous space, in the Hindu space, then we have to make it happen. And not only do we have to build, we also have to clear away and defend against assaults. So, Sriji, if I can say it on your behalf, click the like button, press the bell for notifications or what have you, and even better, send a few pennies towards P Guru so they can do even more work. Sriji, thank you very much and best wishes and good luck with the book. I'm sure it's going to be a great success. So, Jai
Thank
Shri
you
Ram
so
to
much,
you.
sir. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.